Hi everyone, now we're going to talk about my track emulating the artist Mura Masa, who, as I mentioned, was a London-based producer, best known for his self-titled album, which has a few hits off it. So he mainly uses Ableton, as I've found from a few videos. It's sort of dance tracks that are written with between him as a producer and a vocalist as the lyric and songwriter. So yeah, mainly dance tracks with mixes of samples and also synthesizers and things like that. So during this process, I ran into a few problems which I will get into. But we'll get started. So if I go into Ableton here, the first thing that I found was this sample here. So that was originally at a tempo of 104, and I made it 105, which is obviously pretty similar. I was pretty happy with that sound because Mura Masa has a lot of sort of marimbas and steel drums. It gives sort of a natural sound to something that is more based in electronic. So as you can see, I have a lot of tracks here, 42 tracks in total. So that is the main part of the verse, is just that loop. Right, and then the next sort of things I came up with were the build-ups. So if I play that for you. So in there I've got these sort of atmospheric kind of sounds. Those sounds, they're both pan left and right on different tracks, and then I've just added a delay on one of them, and that's sort of like a sample delay, gives it a bit of a stereo image. As well as that sample, I've also got this going on, which again just gives the track some movement. And then this comes in. Kind of the final build up, and then finally we've got all these build sounds. You've also got these tracks here, which are also pan left and right in the same style. A bit of atmosphere. And then I've got this loop, which again is just sort of a party atmosphere. I've got this build-up arpeggio in one ear, and this one in the other ear, which is very similar to this one. They kind of work together. And yeah, as you can see, just layering all those tracks really creates quite a full-on sound, especially with the atmospheres. I didn't put a whole lot of editing on them. As you can see, I just EQ'd out certain parts that were undesirable. I automated the track volume for this one just to bring out the one part I wanted, that bit there. Yeah, and overall I was pretty happy with that build up, and then right at the end we just have this stuff here. Which is just the big build up into the drop. So you can sort of hear that all together. So I had that part all sorted, and that's when I decided to get into the studio with my vocalist, who was I got Zara to help me out, and we both sort of sat down and we wrote the lyrics together. We started with one concept of sort of a breakup song, and that didn't end up working, and sort of in keeping with the Mura Masa style, we decided to go for something more positive. And a lot of his songs off his album, they have like a lyrical motif around them. For instance, one of them is "Wherever you go, I'm going with you, babe." Another one is "Your love's more precious than gold." So we decided to write something like that and then write around it. And what we came up with was "I'll cross the ocean for you." So this is, we experimented with a few different melodies, and with help from our songwriting tutor, we ended up finding something that we were really happy with. It did take a while, but overall we're pretty happy with how it ended up. So I'll play the first verse for you.
I thought I needed something to help me get through the dark and lonely night. Dragged on, you seemed untouchable and out of reach. Now we're unbreakable, unbreakable. I'll cross the ocean, I'll cross the ocean for you. I'll cross the ocean, ocean. I'll cross the ocean, I'll cross the ocean for you. I'll cross the ocean. Ooh, ooh.
Yeah, so that's where we got with that. And after that, we took a while to come up with the second verse. So in that time, I was able to work on sort of, I guess you'd call the drop or the dance part of the song. And with the Mura Masa songs, the chorus is more of like a dance break than anything. And now I'll sort of introduce you to one of the massive problems that happened. So, I mean, when we were recording the vocals, the studio we were using, it did not have Ableton. So what we had to use was Logic Pro. So what I did is I exported the track, the whole first verse, and I put it into Logic, and then we just recorded from there. And then I was able to export Zara's vocals from Logic and then bring it back into Ableton. And in hindsight, there are a lot more less stressful ways that we could have done this. After a while, I sort of realized that the other studios did have Ableton, and we could have just used that, and it would have been a lot easier. But hindsight's a wonderful thing. Another thing, probably the biggest problem, is before I got to finish this track is my laptop died. And what that meant for me is that I couldn't do any work from home. I had to come in a lot more to school. And yeah, there were a lot of late nights and things like that. But the worst problem of all being that when I lost all the stuff off my laptop, there's a lot of plugins, etc., that I had on that laptop that aren't available at school. So things that I've paid for, such as the main synth I used is called Serum, which you can see here. I've got a lot of serums, and none of those work because they're just not here, so I can't actually show you what those sound like, because it simply doesn't have it, unfortunately. I can show you, so I do have the MIDI information, but I mean that's just basic chords. So what I did in Serum is I just, for the drop, I just opened up the instance of Serum, which I can't do now. But I just played around with a lot of the presets, and I put in LFO, which is low frequency oscillator, and I put it onto a EQ that took out all the top end. So basically what ends up happening is when the sound starts, it is EQ'd down, and then as the sound progresses, it opens up and it gives it sort of a wobble type feel. Something that I was very glad about is that at this point I had exported the track as a WAV file, so it wasn't completely lost. So I still had the sounds from Serum thanks to that export that I did. So if there's any advice I'd give to anyone, it's, as a producer anyway, is make sure you back up your stuff. And I did have a lot of my stuff backed up, which was good, but I didn't have everything backed up. And it's all those little annoying things that you don't realize, like access to these plugins, and yeah, just a million other things really that I didn't expect that I would miss. But now that my laptop's gone, I just, you just end up losing it, which is a real shame. And also, if you have the money, if you are okay with spending that kind of money, then have a backup laptop as well. Because if you're doing live performances, if you're touring, if you're doing anything, if that laptop goes, then you're done. You just can't perform. So you need a backup laptop that has the same software, the same plugins, for it all to work properly. Otherwise, it can turn into a complete shambles. So basically, what I had to do from here is use that export that I had to finish the track. So I was able to get the second verse recorded, which goes like this.
This winter's feeling warmer now that I got you. It's no coincidence you're here. This love will last forever, I'm sure. I feel untouchable. Oh.
Yeah, so that's how the second verse goes, and this is where my work in Ableton stopped, purely because I didn't have all the samples, I didn't have anything. That's another thing about Ableton, is when you save something as a package, what you need to do is go up here and go File and go Collect All and Save. And what that does is it finds where all of your samples are, all of these here, and it will bring them into the same folder that you saved this project at. And that's important because when I lost my laptop, I went to open this project on the school computers, and obviously none of the sound files were there. They were all missing. So, and yet that's another thing as well. Splice.com, which I use to download all of my samples. It keeps a perfect record of the samples that you've downloaded. So I was able to jump on another computer, download all those files, and then use Ableton to find it. And yeah, so I was able to download all of that, and I was able to recover all of what I had lost really, because everything was off Splice.com. Yeah, so at the end of the day, all the things I had missing were just the plugins, which was very annoying because I had already done all of my vocal mixing with a chain of plugins, but unfortunately half of them were missing, so I decided to just turn them all off and finish the project in Logic. So this is where I'll switch over to Logic and show you how I finished the track. Alright, so now we'll get into the Logic part of this track. So I was very lucky in the sense that WAV file that I had exported here on the 10th of August was a pretty good mix that I was happy with. So I'll just play through the part where the drop is so that you can hear all those Serum sounds that were missing in the Ableton project. So that's sort of the drop sound. And then, yeah, from there I dragged in the vocals that I had exported from Ableton. And I'll run you through my channel strip here. We just got rid of a wee bit of the low end sort of room noise and sort of vocal noise that I wasn't super happy with, and just made a bit more room for the bassy synths and stuff like that. I compressed the vocals just to get them at a consistent volume that I was happy with, and I also put a multi-presser on. Now my reasoning for this is I was using a plugin called OTT, which is super useful on pretty much any vocals. It just makes everything sound good. So if you put it on, it's a multi-band compressor, and I sort of tried to copy that here, and it just sort of compressed the top end of the vocals a wee bit just to.
I thought I needed something to help me get
a sound that I'm looking for, and then I just sent some of the vocals to this vocal room reverb here. So from there, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of work to do because I already had all the individual parts. A lot of it was just structuring it. So I did add this in when the drop comes in. It's just a sort of 808 boom noise, and that just added a wee bit of impact to that drop. So from there we get into the second verse. So it's got basically the intro part of the track again, with a lot of the high end taken out, and I've just automated here that high cut to come up, so it sort of builds into the pre-chorus. And here is the verse 2 vocals.
This winter's feeling warmer now.
Now the reason I'm running this on a separate channel is because I recorded it into a different microphone, and the sounds are slightly different. So basically there was already no low end in this, but I did run a similar compressor and multi-band compressor, as well as sending it to the same reverb channel.
It's no coincidence.
Now, just to add some sort of some rhythm to the second verse, I added in these drums here, as well as a sample that I had found.
This winter's feeling warmer now that I got you. It's no coincidence, you're here.
And then just to add something at the start and end of the track, sort of an intro and an outro, I just had this vinyl crackle, and that's automated to go down through the whole track, but it's just at the beginning. That just adds a bit of ambience, and it would sort of make it more in the context of an album as well, like Mura Masa's track. What I did from here is I EQ'd out some of the bass, because the track was very bass heavy, and then just made it a bit brighter on the top end, as well as giving a wee bit of gain in the limiter, just to sort of make the whole track a wee bit louder, because these dance tracks, they are very heavily compressed, and they're made for sort of nightclubs and stuff like that, where the sound is very full on and very intense, especially the kick drum. So that's sort of what I was going for. And yeah, that sort of rounds out how I managed to salvage this track. So yeah, that's that. Yeah, so overall I was pretty happy with how my Mura Masa track ended up, especially when it comes to all of the sort of trials that I went through during creating it, and how difficult it was. So I mean, the main lesson that I would take from this absolutely is back up everything. So even if you think you've backed up your work, like I thought I had, it really was only part of it. Like, you're best off to at least once a month completely back up your entire computer with everything. And I mean, I'm very lucky in the sense that I was able to salvage my project, but I can imagine situations where the same thing could happen to someone who is in a much worse position than me. So it could ruin their gig, it could ruin they could lose years of work. So absolutely use splice.com because it saves you samples. It also has a feature where it automatically uploads to the cloud. It automatically uploads your projects, so it'll find your Logic, Ableton, Pro Tools, any kind of music project. It can recognize the DAW and automatically upload your projects and back it up for you. So I would highly recommend that. And sort of not giving up either. Like when I lost my laptop and when it broke, and all of this kind of happened, it was pretty easy for me to want to say, okay, I'll just do something else. But I had spent months on this track, and I'm super happy that I didn't give up and I was able to sort of salvage it. So there are ways around it, but back up your work, people.